Okay, these are guardrails. Okay, so we discussed like three-ish questions that you can ask yourself to build healthy application as a Bible teacher. But now we want to switch gears and we know three good questions to ask to produce healthy application. But now I want to put up 5 guardrails that we should have to avoid bad application. So here we're going to pick on the rookies. So rookies in the room. Let's see. We got Angela. We got Katie Prescott. We got Renee. We got Kimberly. So if y'all want to try to pay attention, and at the end of this, if y'all could all give me at least one bad example, even if you use the example that I'm going to give you with Joseph, just give me one bad example of application at the end and why. So, okay, let's talk about these guardrails. So once you get done writing your application, these are questions you can ask yourself to be like, did I just do this wrong? Did I just mess this up? Okay, so these are questions you ask yourself to see if you just lit something on fire. Okay, here we go. Number 1, am I skipping the primary, original, theological meaning and jumping straight to personal relevance? I'm going to explain what that means. Every text, generally speaking, has a primary focus. There is a primary truth that it's teaching. And that primary focus and that primary truth meant something to the original audience. So, for example, Sheena and Rachel were kind of picking on the often poorly applied text, I can do all things through Christ, right? And football teams talk about like, we can do everything through Christ. We're going to win our football game. Well, clearly that's strike one, because Paul was not writing to a football team. So that could not have been the original application because the original audience was not a football team. So we want to ask, was this application, like what was it saying to the original people? If it wasn't true for the original people, then it's not going to be true for us, right? So that's already a bad application. So an example of this is, if a bad example is, Joseph's story is all about how we should handle sexual temptation today. Right? People go through Joseph's narrative and they're like, oh, this is about sexual temptation. Well, I think that's a good secondary point, but it's not the primary theological point. The primary point is that God is with his people during suffering. God has purpose in suffering. So we want to make sure we don't jump to those secondary or tertiary application points. We always want it to be true for the primary focus of the text should be the primary focus of our message. Okay, we'll continue on. We got 4 more of these dudes. Let's see here. Okay, number 1, am I making a specific promise from the text that God does not actually guarantee? Am I making a specific promise from the text that God does not actually guarantee? Okay, so for example, if you read the story of Joseph and you were like, look, homeboy, like, he fled, he was able to flee temptation, he was able to remain sexually pure, and then he got a boss promotion. Therefore, if you remain sexually pure, you're going to get a boss promotion, right? So you are making a promise that the text did not make. Okay, and the reason why that's bad is because that story is a description of a time that happened to somebody else. But I mean, we also know that Paul kept his sexual purity and he got his head chopped off, so sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some. So we can't make a promise that the text doesn't make. Neither is that the focus of that narrative. So that's strike 1 and 2. So don't make a promise that the text doesn't make. Number 3, ask yourself, am I turning this passage into a moral lesson rather than seeing its theological depth? Right? So same thing here. If we go to the Joseph story and all we do is tell our people, hey, you need to be sexually pure like Joseph. Well, let's think about this. If that's all we do, people come to church and we tell them be sexually pure like Joseph, and then they leave, and let's say that they go and they are super sexually pure for the rest of their life. If that's all you told them, they're going to die and they're going to go to hell very sexually pure because you completely ignored the element of faith, right? Joseph wasn't sexually pure because it was a good thing to do, right? It actually says in the text, he said, how could I sin against my God? Right? So the reason he was sexually pure was because of his faith in God. So we want to avoid taking any text and just making it a simple moral lesson while ignoring the element of faith. Because at the end of the day, if all we do is tell people to be good, even if they listen to us, their good works are filthy rags because they're not rooted in the faith of God. They're not rooted in the gospel. So we're going to create really well-behaved little Pharisees who keep lots of rules and who don't understand grace, right? So we want to make sure we never make a text a mere moral lesson. Next, we need to ask ourselves, am I forcing a modern issue into the passage that isn't really there? Okay, honest, I actually heard someone take this text one time and they used it for gender boundaries in the workplace. Honestly, like I heard that. That was a legitimate thing where they were like, men and women should, never be in the car together because look at what happened with Joseph. And I was like, bro, that is not the purpose of that text. Now, if you think that separately and you want to make that point, like that's debatable. That's fine. Like you can make that point, but you cannot use this text to make that point because the purpose, the author's intention here is not for you to go, oh my gosh, like women always try to be seducing men. Like that's messed up. Stay away from women, especially if they got money. Like that's bad, man. Or don't be ripped like Joseph, like that's his problem, right? These are terrible application because that's not the application that the author had intended, right? So am I forcing a modern issue into the passage that isn't there? It doesn't match the author's intention. So, all right, last one. Am I prioritizing personal comfort or self-improvement over the gospel? Am I prioritizing personal comfort or self-improvement over the gospel? Okay, another way to ask this is, does my application make Christianity sound like self-help? Or does it make the application sound like surrender to Christ? So, if you took the narrative of Joseph, and I've heard this is real, that, Joseph was faithful. He made good choices, right? He forgave his brothers and he fled temptation. And because of that, he ended up having a really good life. So you just need to be obedient and faithful and pure, and you'll have a really good life. You need to do this thing, and then God will bless you. Anytime you say that, you're not being a Christian. Like this idea that you need to discipline yourself to be a good person so that God will bless you, that is not Christianity. Now, look, we want to have faith in Jesus, and that produces good works. And God blesses our good works as long as they flow from a heart of faith. That's fine. But we never want to take a text and just make it you need to do this good thing. You need to help yourself. You need to get sober. You need to get strong. You need to get healthy. You need to do this thing by self-discipline, and then God will bless you, right? We never want to make it about self-help. We always want to make it about being helped by God. So, okay. In short, I'll summarize this for us. So number one, don't miss the primary focus. Most texts have one primary truth that they're trying to teach. So make sure the primary truth of the text is the primary truth of your message, right? We want to be big where the text is big. We want to be small where the text is small. Next, we do not want to make a promise that God never made. Do not take a narrative where somebody ended up doing well and then say, well, there you have it, right? We're all going to do well, right? Do not make a promise that God did not make. Number three, do not reduce the passage into a mere moral lesson. It's okay to tell people to behave well, but it needs to flow from a heart of faith in God, right? Not merely telling people to behave well because it's right. Because ultimately we can't behave well outside of faith in God, right? That's works, that's not faith. And a lot of these overlap. Don't forget to acknowledge the timeless theme of the text, right? Don't jump immediately to modern day application. You have to acknowledge the timeless theme, how it's true for all people at all times. Otherwise, you're going to jump to immediate application. We're going to miss the experience of the text. And then lastly, don't make it a self-help lesson. Don't make it a self-help lesson. Don't make it, hey, here's 5 things that you can do to improve your life. Right? That's why we're Christians, because we knew there's not one thing I can do to improve my life outside of Jesus. Right? Okay, so there's some guardrails to make sure we don't do application wrong.